I'll be off now.
Waving at the photo in the living room. I stepped out under the blue summer sky, which was still hot and humid. I work at a small factory, mainly doing part repairs. My only solace in my tight financial situation is the picture of my wife in the living room and the one in my wallet of the two of us. Literally, no matter how depressed I got, looking at those photos always lifted my spirits. It's been 17 years since my wife went missing. Not just my wife. Just a landslide hit the small town in Nebraska where we used to live, affecting many. She was one of them. The town was destroyed, and the survivors, with the help of the government, moved to a nearby city. The abandoned town is still covered in debris, which whenever I got a day off, I went back there, digging with a shovel, searching for any trace of my wife. Every time I met with fellow townsfolk, our shared pain was palpable. Why did she have to get caught up in that disaster? Why? Every time I turned the soil, regret consumed me.
You're an out-of-office repair job.
My boss, Mr. Davis, called me early upon arrival, hinting at a transfer due to a new department.
You're good with people and knowledgeable. I believe you can handle anything on the field.
Able to refuse, I begrudgingly accepted, feeling a tad overwhelmed. That the scope of the repair trips isn't clear yet. I've only been repairing what's sent in, which meant coming to the office every day was all I've had to do. If this means driving to places, even thinking about it tires me.
Please. You're the only one I can rely on, he added with some cliché words before I left his office.
All I want is a peaceful life until retirement. But that's life, isn't it? I checked each tool, preparing for out-of-office requests. For the most part, I visited elderly people's homes. Scans at the beginning of summer, heaters in winter, and radios or TVs on some occasions. It felt like I was becoming a jack of all trades, but unlike my time confined to the factory, I now enjoyed hearing memories tied to the items I was fixing. By the way, the neighbors were saying, "Oh yes, their oven's been acting up. Could you take a look while you're here?" Mrs. Johnson mentioned this, while treating me to some cookies. This with 2 hours until my next appointment. I was contemplating going back to the factory, so the timing was perfect.
But I'm not sure about the neighbor's availability.
Don't worry about it. It's just an elderly couple like us. I bet they're free.
As she sent this, Mrs. Johnson grabbed a few oranges from the table, and we headed to their neighbors. Contrary to expectation, it wasn't a neighboring house, but a massive mansion behind them.
But the side door faces us, which is why we call them a neighbor. She said, ringing the doorbell.
It's Rebecca.
It's Johnson from next door.
I heard your oven has been having issues, so I brought someone over. After a moment, the gate automatically opened.
They used to own a lot of land around here. Our house was split from this mansion's property when they renovated. It's rare these days. They are very generous people.
Mrs. Johnson shared this as we approached the entrance.
Hello, Rebecca. I just had him check our oven. Maybe he could help you too.
Rebecca, smiling warmly, invited us in. That would be wonderful. Please come in.
It seems the timer's messed up. I want it to bake for 5 minutes, but sometimes it goes for 10 or even just 1.
Sitting in front of an old oven, I began my assessment.
Mr. Smith here. He's from that landslide-affected town in Nebraska.
I see. I had grown used to hearing that as casual chatter.
While eavesdropping on their conversation, I continued my maintenance work.
Speaking of which, the helper who used to come here was also from that village, wasn't she?
Oh, the amnesiac one. I wonder how she's doing now.
Rayhan stopped abruptly.
Oh, you're done with the repair?
But no, not yet. Okay.
That was the least of my concerns. What if that amnesiac woman was my wife? Desperately, I inquired.
What did she look like?
What do you mean?
Becca smiled and showed me a photograph. In that moment, I trembled and tears welled up. Undoubtedly, the woman in the photo was my beloved wife.
Do you know her?
Rebecca handed me a handkerchief, but she knit tightly. I curled up, overwhelmed by my emotions. Are you okay? Maybe you should rest on the sofa. Saying that, Rebecca's husband assisted me.
As my wife.
A faint scream was heard. A deep roaring noise echoed in my ears. I felt dizzy and weak. When he next woke up, I was in a hospital.
You okay? You collapsed during the visit.
Sitting on a metal chair was my boss, Mr. John. I'm sorry. Why am I here? A dull pain ran through my head.
Don't get up so quickly after being out. Mr. John said pushing me gently back onto the bed.
Lisa. Lisa was. Yes. I heard about your wife. They're looking for her now.
But she's being treated as a Jane Doe, so the administration isn't too strict with her. Apparently, they've made her a temporary D, so we might not know her current situation.
I've caused you trouble?
Just take it easy for a while. I know the chief of the hospital, so I'll speak with him.
I can't trouble you like that. Attilations, Mr. John again pressed me down as I tried to rise.
Don't worry about it.
As the door closed, I felt drained. There shouldn't be anything wrong. Yet I felt so weak. Taking some time off, huh?
Remembering that day caused this collapse. You might not realize it, but your heart is deeply wounded. If you don't rest, there's a real chance you won't recover.
But I feel fine. That's the dangerous mindset. Anyway, Mr. John gave his consent to stay. 3 meals a day plus snacks. It's all inclusive here. The chief doctor said with a jovial smile, then left. Restless. I got up and gazed out the window. My wife was definitely in this town. I was filled with frustration. I wanted to leave this place and search for her right away. But there was an IV attached to my arm. I only seemed to resume 2 days later when I received an update. Mr. John came by while I was having breakfast and handed me a note.
Oh, she's here. Oh, just to be sure. I told Rebecca and the others yesterday, and it was indeed her. But keep your expectations in check. Tia could just be someone who looks like her. It's about a 30-minute drive from here.
Please take me there. I put down my fork and with tears in my eyes, begged Mr. John.
Alright, but you only watch from a distance. Well, you're not in the right state of mind, and we don't know how she might react if you approach her suddenly.
I just wanted to see my wife, even if it was just a glance. I agreed to Mr. John's conditions.
Here we are.
He had brought me to a local hotel near the beach.
And she usually works and stays here. Waiting her.
Mr. John entered the inn on his own to speak. While waiting, I decided to go out and listen to the waves. The vast, endless ocean lay before me. Thinking that my wife looked at this same view every day felt so surreal. Hello, are you staying here today? I froze. The tears welled up in my eyes. Turning around, there stood my wife. She looked like she was about to cry just from seeing my face. No, I just came to look at the ocean. I couldn't break my promise to Mr. John. I tried to put some distance between us by heading for the car door. Excuse me. I halted again. The tears were flooding, soaking the pavement. I will. I intently listened to my wife's voice. Such a cherished voice. How many times have I longed to hear it since she went missing? Do we know each other from somewhere? People often tell me I remind them of someone they know. Just an ordinary face. The sea breeze is chilly. Can I head back to the car? She grabbed my arm. The tears were spilling from her eyes. But somehow seeing you makes me feel nostalgic. My heart feels stirred. Unable to restrain myself. I hugged her tightly. Dealing with her memory loss, did a part of her still remember me? I'm sorry, but we've never met, have we? As I wiped away my wife's tears with a handkerchief, Mr. John approached. He looked upon us with a hint of sadness. It's chilly out here. Let's go inside. Hence we were led to the room. I couldn't stop my tears. I was lost, not knowing what to do. The love I felt from my wife was overwhelming, but the thought of her memory loss also brought sadness. My emotions became too much to handle.
The director told me your wife seems as distraught as you. Fate really has its ways, doesn't it?
Mr. John poured hot water into the teapot and served me some tea.
Oh, you should rest for a bit, and then you discuss the next steps with the director and I. Let's not involve your wife in this discussion. Vices might only cause more confusion.
If I had the chance to meet my wife again, I would have hugged her right away, and we would have shared the peaceful moments and talked about the days we were apart. The deep scars of our past weighed on us like a cross. Reality was far from the ideal, and it pained my heart.
Looks like we'll be staying here tonight. Let's take it easy.
The tea Mr. John had served was lukewarm now. I took a deep gulp, took a deep breath, and recalled the image of my wife who was just in front of me moments ago. The night deepened, and after hearing Mr. John snoring, I stepped into the lobby. Outside the window, there was a full moon.
Full moon? Oh, it's beautiful, isn't it?
My wife was standing right beside me. Her eyes were red, probably from crying.
This really is beautiful. Oh, we can see it so clearly from here.
She slowly walked closer to me and stood side by side. How many years has it been? Looking down at her face, I noticed her long eyelashes. She used to be proud of those lashes.
For so long, a part of my heart felt lonely. But after meeting you, it feels like that gap has been filled. I feel so at peace right now.
I stared at the full moon, taking shallow breaths, making sure not to miss a single word from her loving voice. But my own heartbeat seemed exceptionally loud.
I heard from the director about everything. It's still hard to believe me with you.
Turning towards my wife, I looked straight into her eyes.
Please don't say anything more. I'll wait until the day you remember everything.
But that's...
The tears started forming in her eyes again.
17 years. I've been searching for you alone for 17 years. Now that you're in front of me, I can wait any longer.
She nodded slightly and looked up at the full moon again. I wonder if she'll ever recall our shared memories. Right now, I don't know. But relying on the undeniable love between us, I believe that someday she will remember me. Until that day, I'll come to see her as many times as needed. I'm working as a medical representative Murph in a pharmaceutical company. An MREP's job, in simple terms, is to sell the drugs manufactured by the company to hospitals. Though precisely, the main job isn't so much selling but explaining the drugs. You're right to consider it as a sales job. Misses are constantly on the move, trying to convince big hospitals to use the new drugs that their company has developed. But for me, regardless of the size of the hospital, I won't sell a drug unless the physician is fully convinced and before we build a trustworthy relationship. After all, I'm involved in people's lives here. I always prioritize the health of the patients. Because of this, my sales performance is unimpressive, and I'm one of the slowest among my peers to get promoted. I'm aware that my juniors make fun of me behind my back, saying that I'm not very savvy. But I have my firm belief that the most important thing is the patient's lives. And then an opportunity came to me. The physician at a private practice, whom I always interact with, introduced a new drug I had recommended to a large hospital where his mentor was the director. My boss was overjoyed when he found out that this mentor was Dr. Kent Baker, a prominent figure in the medical community.
Listen, Dutch's productoriums, you should grab this opportunity. If we can get Baker General Hospital to use it, it will be a huge selling point to other hospitals. We're counting on you.
My boss, who usually just scolds me, patted my back with a big smile on his face. Even Wilson, a junior colleague accompanying me to the negotiation, seemed to look at me with something like respect. I will make sure to explain it thoroughly. I responded modestly, to which my boss gave me a stern glare.
Don't just explain it, bring back a contract. Stop all this idealistic talk.
But with a growl, he almost ordered, and I bowed in silence and left the scene. I know my straightforwardness isn't always the best approach. But people don't change their beliefs so easily. As I stepped outside, it was raining. The rain was coming down hard, so I decided to take a taxi. But while lining up at the taxi stand with Wilson, we were going over the negotiation flow of the meeting. Suddenly, I noticed a woman behind us covering her mouth with a handkerchief. I could tell at a glance that she was pregnant. I could see her hand holding the umbrella was slightly trembling. Feeling concerned, I asked her, "Are you feeling okay?"
Yes, I'm okay. She replied with a weak voice, but her face was pale.
I wanted to let her sit down, but the bench was wet from the rain.
Hey, well, it's about 20 Apple use you. Our taxi is here to Wilson, just as a taxi pulled up in front of us.
Without hesitation, I told the woman, "Please, you go ahead." Wilson gave me a dissatisfied look, but I ignored it. I reached out to help the woman get into the taxi. Just then, her body wobbled. I quickly held her with both hands.
Where you are?
I exclaimed, to which she weakly shook her head. Her eyes were tightly shut, and she was breathing painfully.
There's your gynecology clinic. We should head there right away.
I said as I helped her into the cab. Great between labored breaths, she managed to mention the name of the hospital. I told the driver the name of the clinic and asked him to hurry. At the driver's hesitation, I considered calling an ambulance for a moment, but decided that it was better to get her to the clinic as soon as possible. "Please," I repeated. At that moment, the woman grabbed my arm with her trembling hand. "I'll accompany you. Please, let's go right now." As I spoke, I got into the cab next to the woman. Lest Wilson panicked and grabbed the closing door. I forcefully closed the door. The taxi began to move, leaving behind a shouting Wilson. "For now, it might be best to have someone from your family. Can you get in touch with your husband?" The woman opened her eyes and nodded painfully, pulling out her phone from her bag with shaking fingers. "Let me make the call." I took the phone from her and put it to my ear. After a few rings, a calm male voice answered. I briefly explained the situation. Her husband promptly acknowledged and assured me he would head to the clinic right away. "Your husband is on his way. Hang in there." While speaking, I took out my own phone and called Baker General Hospital. I requested the receptionist connect me to Dr. Baker. After being put on hold for a while, I heard Dr. Baker's calm voice. I briefly explained the current situation and apologized for being late to the meeting.
"I see. I understand. I pray for the woman's safety."
Weber sent Dr. Baker as he hung up. There was no anger in his voice. I felt a sense of relief and admiration for his priority of human life. I was glad to see someone that puts human life first. "I'm sorry for causing such trouble." The woman tightly gripped my arm. I quickly held her hand and repeatedly reassured her that it was okay. Upon arrival at the clinic, the woman was quickly taken away on a stretcher. Once I felt reassured, I informed the nurse that the woman's husband would arrive soon. Just then, a man in a suit came running in. I replied, "Are you her husband?" "I was the one who called you from the taxi." But the man, looking deeply moved, firmly shook my hand. He appeared to be in his late 30s, an intelligent-looking man with glasses. "It's okay. I just did what anyone would do. I hope for the safety of your wife and baby." I bowed my head and was about to leave when the husband asked for my name. I handed him my business card. I have to go back to work. Excuse me. I hurriedly left the scene and rushed to Baker General Hospital. However, I never made it to the hospital that day. Just as I was about to get into a cab, I received a call from Wilson, who informed me that Dr. Baker had to leave on an urgent matter. Wait, Dr. Baker promised to wait. I raised my voice. But Wilson retorted in an annoyed tone, I don't know. Anyway, it's pointless for you to come here today. He hung up without waiting for my response. In disbelief, I called Baker General Hospital, but the receptionist confirms that Dr. Baker was indeed out, and I hung up the phone, feeling hopeless. Upon returning to the office, what awaited me was a verbal thrashing from my boss, the likes of which I had never encountered before. I could only hang my head in silence as he bellowed at me, his voice echoing throughout the department. Enough! We're off this project. Get ready for demotion. He spat out before storming out of the room. I accepted differently. I returned to my desk, but my coworker Wilson wouldn't look at me, and no one else in the office dared to speak to me. That's when my cell phone rang. The call was from an unfamiliar number. I stepped out to take it, only to find that it was the husband of the pregnant woman.
My wife and baby are both safe. If the procedure had been delayed, it could have been dangerous. I really can't thank you enough. We will come to thank you at your company tomorrow.
He said.
No, that's not necessary. So, but your gratitude is more than enough. I'm truly happy. Thank you so much for letting me know, I replied.
After hanging up the phone, I was relieved from the bottom of my heart, but the suffocating feeling that I'd had until a moment ago had vanished, and I was overcome with a sense of lightness. When I got home, I told my wife, after and about the day's events. We had been married for 2 years and still didn't have any children. While we were sitting across from each other at dinner, I apologized to Catherine.
If I really get demoted, it would be a bother to you. Sorry.
But we did. Catherine smiled and asked, Bob, do you regret it? I asked myself the same question. No matter how many times I found myself in a similar situation, I thought I would make the same decision. So, I shook my head.
I don't, even if the business meeting had gone well, I would never have been able to feel happy if I had left that person behind.
Well then, it's fine, isn't it? No matter what happens with your job, and even if you're demoted, you'd do the same thing, right? You just work hard to deliver good medicine to as many patients as possible. That's whether it's in the north or on a southern island, the patients are the same.
I truly loved Catherine for saying such things.
I'm proud of you, Bob. So don't apologize.
I swallowed hard to hold back tears and said, thank you. The next day, I was summoned by the CEO. Apologies, I was prepared for some sort of disciplinary action, but I had not expected to be called by the CEO himself. My throat went dry at the thought of possibly getting fired. When I knocked on the door to the CEO's office and was told to come in, I steeled myself and opened the door.
You.
I was so surprised I couldn't help but shout. Sitting next to the CEO was the husband of the pregnant woman. And in front of them was Dr. Baker.
I should have introduced myself earlier. Plus, my name is Thomas Baker. I'm a doctor at a medical clinic. Where's the man sitting here? Dr. Kent Baker is my father.
The man stood up and gestured for me to sit next to Dr. Baker.
The woman you helped yesterday was Mr. Baker's wife, said the CEO. Mr. Baker nodded in agreement.
The proud said the CEO. Mr. Baker nodded in agreement.
I truly thank you. Though from what I hear, you had a important business meeting with my father yesterday. Yeah, you chose to accompany a stranger, my wife Ashley, to the hospital. I can only express my gratitude for your decision.
Mr. Baker bowed his head deeply, caught off guard by the sudden turn of events. I struggled to keep up. So that's her name, Ashley.
After you called to tell me you'd be late for the meeting, my son informed me that my daughter-in-law had been taken to the clinic. I was completely flustered by the news, especially since it involved my first grandchild. I hurried over there myself.
He explained.
I was surprised when my son showed me your business card, but thinking it over, the story you told me over the phone and what my son told me were the same. I feel like a fool for not noticing earlier.
Dr. Baker, the hospital director, said, touching his forehead in embarrassment. He then turned to me and said, Mr. Williams, I want to express my gratitude once again. Thanks to you, I didn't lose my grandchild. I truly appreciate it.
No, Sam, I just did what anyone would have done.
As I waved my hand in front of my face in embarrassment, Dr. Baker asked, so for you, helping a complete stranger is more important than a critical business negotiation. Well, I was concerned about how the CBO would react. I answered without hesitation, yes, that's right.
Well, business meetings can be rescheduled, but human life once lost can't be regained. I lost my little brother to peritonitis when I was 6. It's like Leedy, if only I'd taken him to the hospital sooner, he would have survived. So, thinking it was too late and that we could deal with it the next day was a naive decision that took my little brother's life. Life doesn't wait for us. Working in this job and dealing with so many patients has made me realize this. That's why I don't regret prioritizing your daughter-in-law that time.
As I stated my case clearly, the CEO watched me with a wry smile.
I'll make it up to the company for any trouble I've caused. I'm prepared for any disciplinary actions that might come my way.
Hearing my words, the CEO laughed loudly.
I'm not foolish enough to demote you in this situation. Why do you think we're all here together?
Of course, to hear about the new drug from Mr. Williams. Could you explain it to us again?
Being asked by the director, I happily responded loudly, of course. I then proceeded to explain the new drug in detail. I was honest about both its advantages and disadvantages. The two Mr. Bakers listened attentively with serious expressions.
That's about it. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.
At my words, Dr. Baker shook his head with a smile.
I think it's an excellent drug. Much to the questions. I'll discuss it with the other doctors as soon as I return to the hospital, and we'll get back to you promptly.
I was pleased, but I felt the need to clarify one point, so I opened my mouth.
Thank you. But I have one request. Please don't give me, special consideration just because I helped Ashley. Today's incident was a happy coincidence, but no special consideration is necessary for the business negotiations, so please consider purely from a medical perspective whether this drug can help as many patients as possible.
I felt the CEO's sharp gaze upon me.
Acceptable, even without today's incident. I believe it's a wonderful new drug that would convince Dr. Baker. Thank you for your care consideration.
I bowed my head. Dr. Baker responded in a quiet voice. Understood?
For meeting you today. I'm Mr. Williams. I feel like I've been reminded once again of the importance of thinking about the patients. I thought all medical representatives were just salespeople, but you're a comrade in the medical field just like us.
And Dr. Baker's words. I felt like my approach to my job had been recognized, and I was close to tears.
You're lucky to have such an excellent employee. It must be nice. Mr. President,
Dr. Baker smiled at the CEO. The CEO's troubled smile was amusing. Afterwards, the new drug was introduced at Baker Hospital, and as word spread, inquiries came flooding in from other hospitals. Instead of being demoted, I was promoted and now serve as the leader of the sales team. However, my attitude towards my work hasn't changed. I'm committed to doing my job with unwavering conviction. That's remembering that my job touches people's lives. I visit hospitals one by one each day. Hey, did you see my stuff? She asked with tears in her eyes. No, I didn't. I swear I didn't. But despite his desperate denial, it only served to make her angrier. You don't have to lie. Her anger was justified. I'd seen some of her private belongings.
My name is Luke Gallagher. I'm 24 years old. As your average guy, second year employee in the workforce.
I went to college like anyone else, graduated and secured a job in an ordinary company. If there's anything out of the ordinary, it might be the fear factor of the director in the company I work for. It seems the director has a certain technique. It's called the tap of demotion. Apparently, if the director pats you on the shoulder one day, it means you're about to be demoted. A horrifying concept indeed. But being a regular office worker like me, I doubt I'll even get a chance to have a chat with the director, let alone a shoulder tap. Ever would I have imagined I'd find myself in such an extraordinary situation? Not until it happened. It happened one evening after work. As I arrived at my apartment and was about to unlock the door, I heard a whoops from behind. I couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, despite it being late in the evening. I hastily covered my mouth. I turned around with this thought. To my surprise, there was a golden retriever standing there. Despite covering my mouth, I let out another yell. Okay, it's late at night. No matter what happens, I won't be surprised. With that thought, I slowly approached the dog. Hey, whose dog are you? A resident's pet? At this apartment building allows pets, so the dog must belong to one of the residents. What should I do with this dog? As I was pondering about what to do, I suddenly heard a loud noise, the sound of a door being forcefully opened, and a female voice called out, Elena. Elena, you're back. Was almost startled into raising my voice again by the sudden woman's voice. I remembered my resolve to not yell and somehow restrained myself. The woman was likely the occupant of the next-door apartment. She usually walks out every morning wearing the uniform of a prestigious local private school, so she must be a high school student. This high school girl was calling the dog by what seemed to be its name. So this means, is this your dog by any chance? That's as I turned to ask. I was surprised by the woman's appearance. Oh my God! I couldn't help but exclaim. Because she was in her underwear, with only a shabby jersey thrown over. Moreover, she was wearing large black-rimmed glasses, and her hair was tied up at the top of her head, swaying with each movement. Surprised to be seen in such a state, she exclaimed, "Oh." Hastily, she pulled the dog named Elena into her house and quickly shut the door. "Afternoon," I mumbled. "What was that?" Stunned, after a moment, I decided I should go inside my apartment for now. The next morning, as usual, I stepped out to go to work. That's when I realized this time of the day. I heard a loud noise from next door, the sound of a door being shut. I reluctantly turned to look at the next apartment. When I turned around, there she was, immaculately dressed in her school uniform, without her glasses, probably wearing contacts, and her hair let down in silky waves. Her face was flushed, clearly embarrassed. Feeling the awkward silence, I couldn't help but to break it, stuttering, "TUD. You found your puppy, that's good. Oh, thank you. Did you rescue her?" Feeling slightly wounded by her referring to me as a middle-aged man, I reasoned that to a high school girl, a 24-year-old might indeed seem old. I replied to her question, "Well, not exactly rescue, but I happened to be around when she needed help." That alone means a lot to me. Elena and I just moved here recently. She ran away during a walk in an unfamiliar neighborhood. If you hadn't been there to stop her, I'm sure she would have run away again. Thank you so much. Just as she bowed deeply in gratitude, something must have slipped out of her loosely closed backpack. Something fell out, I said as I bent down to pick it up. She quickly snatched it away from me with a panicked look. Then she asked me, "Did you see it?" Her face was on the verge of tears. "No, I didn't. I didn't see anything." Despite my desperate reassurances, she snapped, "You don't have to lie." I couldn't blame her for getting angry. After all, I'd seen it. Protest papers, covered in bold red markings of 24, 17, and the highest number I could see was probably 41. That's even at a glance. I could tell. You saw my test papers, didn't you? I felt increasingly awkward as she asked me this, her face redder than when I had seen her the day before, and mumbled an apology, i.e., I'm sorry, even though it was beyond my control. Winking at my face with a still flushed complexion, she demanded when you finish work, treat me to coffee at the cafe near the station.
Was that her way of letting it slide?
Oh, right, got it. And that's how I ended up being asked to buy coffee for a high school girl after work. Guess what's general basis? When work was over and I headed to the cafe near the station as she'd asked, she was already waiting in front of the cafe. When she saw me, she cheerfully waved and called out, "Hey, over here, mister." I felt embarrassed as she called me "Ims Neisters," loudly drawing the attention of those around us, and hurried over to her. "I'm Luke Gallagher. So call me Luke outside. I'm only 24. You know, I pleaded, hurt by being referred to as an old man." To this, she looked a bit surprised, but after seeing my serious expression, she relented. "Okay, Luke." They entered the cafe together. I ordered a coffee, and she ordered some kind of frappe. She even asked me to order a piece of cake, and the two of us were now sitting at our table. The awkwardness was palpable, probably due to the events of the previous night and that morning.
Butcher it anyway. You remember this. I decided to ask her. By the way, what's your name?
I'm Jessica Wentz. And Luke, how much of my test paper did you see?
Asuka, and she almost said I missed her again, didn't she?
I remembered the incident from this morning.
What I saw was big red numbers like 27, 17, 41.
Asuka fell flat on the table and wailed. "You saw everything. My test scores."
So those are test scores. Outside, they're pretty low.
That's why I said I didn't want to go to a prep school. A public school would have been just fine.
It's true that the school Jessica attends is known not only as a prestigious school, but also a college preparatory one with a high academic reputation.
Oh, why did you decide to go to that high school?
When I asked, Jessica responded with a pouty face.
My dad told me to go there. I'm the heir, after all.
So that means Jessica's parents must be running a business.
But you'd understand if you saw my test scores, right? They don't match up. And yet, when my dad saw my test scores, he got really angry. I was so upset. I ran away from home with Alina.
And away? Do you mean... You said, you just moved? Did you move here all by yourself?
Yeah, so what?
But, there's no way a minor can sign a lease and live alone.
Oh, well.
Seeing Jessica's nonchalant attitude, I was surprised and said, "Huh? Really? No, that's not the point. Don't your parents worry about you? You should pack up and go home right away," trying to calmly advise her.
No way! I don't care if I get expelled because of my bad test scores. Something I want to do too.
Something you want to do?
I want to be a veterinarian. I absolutely don't want to take over my dad's business.
Oh, that's a great dream. Having a dream is a good thing. Doesn't that mean you have to study even harder?
But even if I study hard, my dream won't come true.
How do you don't know that? If you have a dream, you want to realize you have to try everything you can. Have you talked to your dad about it?
I haven't, but it's impossible. I'm an only child, and I'm told to take over.
I wonder if it's a family business. With that thought in mind, I came up with an idea.
In that case, when you grow up and meet a wonderful man, why don't you have him marry into your family? And he could take over, right? I don't think it'll go that smoothly, but it's worth considering as an option. Because,
As I said that, Jessica's eyes sparkled.
I hadn't thought of that. That's right. There's no need to stick with me. But all that matters is having someone from the family to take over.
Convinced, Jessica said, I'll tell my dad. See you, Luke, and quickly drained her drink and left the cafe, as if embodying the phrase strike while the iron is hot. I was continuously surprised by the whirlwind that is Jessica. What an amazing girl! Uttering that, I also finished my coffee and left the cafe. A few days later, I left the house at the usual time that day, but Jessica, who was supposed to leave at the same time, didn't show up. I hadn't heard any noise since last night, so I figured she must have gone to her parents' house. Even though we didn't talk much given her personality, I'm sure she must have argued her point to her father. So imagining that scenario, I thought it was just like Jessica, and I chuckled.
keep working hard to make your dream come true.
And then, just like always, I went to work and did my job. As I was focusing on my work, I felt a tap on my shoulder.
Is someone calling me?
Thinking that, I stopped my work for a moment and looked behind me. When I saw who it was, I turned pale, because standing there was
ID adoption?
Hey, you've been working hard. You're Gallagher, right?
Yes, the director known for his shoulder tap of reassignment. I just got a shoulder tap from the director. Which means, am I being reassigned? Whether or not the director knew about my panic, he smiled at me and said, "You'll come, right?" With no room for refusal in his smile, all I could do was nod and say yes. I was led by the director to the CEO's office. Did I mess something up? Luke wonders, entering the CEO's office with trepidation over an unexpected demotion. CEO, I've brought him. This is Luke Gallagher. The director reports to the CEO.
Ah, thank you. You can go back now.
Oh yes, she's...
As the director leaves, Luke grows even more anxious. Sensing his unease, the CEO shows him a gentle smile.
No need to be so tense. Actually, you had a visitor, and I asked the director to bring you here.
A visitor for me? Who is it?
That's in response to his question, the CEO reaches for the door that leads to the adjacent room.
They're in the reception room next door. Please go in.
The CEO opens the door for him, and Luke bows lightly in gratitude before entering the reception room.
Excuse me.
Thus, upon entering the reception room, he finds an unfamiliar man in his late 50s. But the man, upon seeing Luke, studies him closely. Oh, you must be Luke Gallagher.
Yes. And you are?
Sorry for the late introduction. I am Thomas Ince, CEO of ISM Holdings. I've been doing business with your CEO.
Ince. I've heard that name somewhere.
Recalling the familiar name, Hook thinks of Jessica's face.
Can it be... You are,
Correct. I am Jessica's father. My daughter must have troubled you.
No, not at all. I had no idea she was the daughter of the CEO of SM Holdings. I am terribly sorry for my ignorance.
ISM Holdings. It's a major client for our company. Jessica? No. Miss Jessica is a genuine young lady of high status. Jessica Moan. And I have seen her in her undergarments, seen her failing test papers, and even given unsolicited advice, considering I am older. What an impertinence I've shown. Could this be the reason for my demotion? Amidst my turmoil at the arrival of CEO Ince, he seems amused at my reaction.
Actually, oh yes. I have a favor to ask you today.
Do a favor.
Wait, to be blunt. CEO Ince starts, his tone hinted at something more significant. Could I be demoted for being rude to his daughter?
He says my daughter wants to work hard at her current school in return for giving up being my successor. She says she wants to be a vet. You're the one who inspired her, aren't you?
Saying that, CEO Ince looks at me with piercing eyes.
I should have just lied as though it was better to be a successor. Just because I talked a little with the CEO's daughter, could I be demoted? Because my ordinary and stable life is over.
Will I despair alone? CEO Ince suddenly bows deeply, and then from him an unexpected freeze emerges.
Thank you. My daughter, who I thought had no dreams, actually had a proper one. I felt my own inadequacy while being moved by her, growth. I wanted her to be my successor if she had no dreams. But if she has dreams, girl, I want to support her. You're the one who gave her that opportunity. Thank you very much.
I didn't do anything. Just advised her to do what she can if she has a dream and to communicate well. Simple advice.
That advice is something I couldn't give. I am full of gratitude for you.
Please, don't bow your head like that. CEO Ince. Instead, I'm truly sorry for resulting in you losing your successor. It feels rather uneasy for a low-level employee like me to be bowed to by the CEO. In response to CEO Ince, I also bowed deeply.
Losing a successor. Well, it's quite a blow, to be honest. I was sorry to ask this after, I'm sorry after thanking you, but I need you to take responsibility for that as well.
I thought so. I'm gonna be held accountable, probably through demotion.
Accepting it is inevitable. I brace myself.
I'm prepared to accept whatever disposition awaits me.
CEO Ince bursts out laughing. And
I see. I see. Well, I feel relieved there's someone like you there.
could the ongoing demotion of a person really be something that amusing? And I was pondering over this. CEO Ince slapped me on the shoulder. And Terry as another shoulder slap. I had grown tired of the director's constant shoulder pats, and I had the feeling that this one didn't bode well. And the CEO started to speak.
Besides my daughter's fiance and my successor, come work at our company.
I was prepared to accept any treatment that came my way. So when Ince asked me, I replied, yes, without much thought. It was only afterward that I realized. Tom, with fiancé? Successor?
Yes. I asked my daughter what we should do about the successor, and she told me she planned to marry her boyfriend someday and wanted him to take over. I thought it was a good idea. I thought it was a good idea.
No, just because she said that, making me the candidate is, you must have better candidates, right?
Well, even if my strong-willed daughter has a boyfriend, I doubt, there are many who would not only marry her but also agree to become a successor.
Indeed. I grimaced at Incy's words. Given her feisty nature, anyone who got involved with her would be in for a rough ride. She was known for dramatically moving out at the drop of a hat. No, just because of that, it doesn't mean I should be the one. Shouldn't you prioritize your daughter's feelings? But becoming the fiancé of a CEO's daughter from such a large corporation was too intimidating. I was trying to subtly refuse, but CEO Ents, grinning as if he wouldn't let me escape, started to massage my shoulder.
One who nominated you was my daughter. Jessica.
Take responsibility for seeing that. Now, what could that be? At this point, Ince's expression turned stern. Upon hearing that, I recalled the shabby sweatpants and the failed test paper. Which one was Jessica's that? Either way, I didn't have the courage to answer that in front of CEO Ince. Haha, I'd be delighted to accept your proposal. And thus, instead of being demoted, I found myself switching to a major corporation. And not just that, I also ended up as the fiancé and successor to the CEO's daughter. Because I happened to see that of the high school girl living next door, my life took a turn for the extraordinary from what should have been a normal life. 6 years later, the high school girl who used to live next door had become my wife, sitting beside me. She had achieved her dream of becoming a veterinarian. Speaking of which, I asked Jessica, why were you almost naked that time, wearing only a tattered jersey top? Upon hearing my question,
I'd just gotten out of the bath. I heard Alina crying while I was changing, so I rushed out in a hurry.
So that's why you were dressed like that. But didn't you have something better to wear? As I grumbled, Jessica chuckled. Because I left home suddenly, I only had that to change into. It was my middle school jersey.
And besides, Jessica gave me a mischievous smile. You'd feel more comfortable than some overdressed lady, right?
Comfortable with whom?
It's a secret.
At Jessica's smile, all I could do was return a bitter smile. Bunch people sure are scary. I'm a sales rep at a construction company. Despite being a sales rep, I'm a poor performer. I've always been troubled by my mediocre sales performance. And eventually, this month, I was told I was being relegated by my boss. I have a wife and a 3-year-old child. However, my wife has a job, so she couldn't move with me, and I reluctantly accepted a solitary work assignment. That place I was relegated to was a branch office in a regional city. The apartment provided by the branch office seemed to be well over 60 years old. The railings on the outside stairs are terribly rusty, and when I touched them, my hand got covered in rust. Some parts of the building were even decaying. Looking down the hallway inside the apartment, the floor creaked. There were no signs of anyone living around the apartment, and the whole area looked like a wasteland. I felt pathetic about myself that I had been relegated to such a place. I left the crummy apartment in the morning to go to the branch office, and as soon as it was time to leave, I hurried back to that apartment. For dinner, I ate a boxed meal I bought from a deli near the branch office. After dinner, there was nothing else to do, so I laid down on my bed, watched TV, and fell asleep. After living in such an apartment for a few days, something happened. As usual, I laid down on my bed in frustration and watched TV, and I gradually felt drowsy and fell asleep with the TV still on. Just as I was falling asleep, I thought I heard a tapping sound and woke up. Half asleep, I thought it was the sound of the TV left on, so I turned it off and climbed back into my bed. But then, I heard the tapping sound again. It was clearer than before. I looked in the direction of the sound. Apparently, the sound was coming from the wall of my room next door. It sounded like someone was knocking on the wall of my room. This time, I jumped up from my bed, tried not to make noise, and listened carefully. But the sound reverberates regularly and steadily. At this hour, who couldn't be? And see, according to the General Affairs Department of the branch office, no one else was living in this crummy apartment. Though at that moment, I was frightened and turned on all the lights in the room. That said, the only lights in the room were in the entrance, kitchen, and my room, which was only 3 places. But mine became instantly bright. There was no one in the room, and I thought to myself, thank God. My heart was starting to calm down. Then, who's knocking on the wall? Thinking this, I collected my courage and put my ear to the wall, just along with the tapping sound. I heard a faint sound from the wall. Ow, ow, how, like someone struggling. I shouted at the wall, is anyone there? I banged on the wall. Then from the wall, a clear knockback sound and a sound like someone coughing came back. In a hurry, I went out to the hallway of the apartment and turned on all the lights. Then I ran down the creaking hallway and opened the door to the next room. The door creaked open. There was an old lady with disheveled white hair. The old lady was coughing and seemed to be in pain. I fetched a cup of water from the kitchen and gave it to her while asking if she was okay and rubbing her back. Her coughing had calmed down. Could I have another glass of water, please? She asked. Sure. And what happened? Why are you coughing so much in the middle of the night? I asked. I just really wanted to eat donuts in this room. She explained she had eaten some donuts. It seemed that some of the pieces of the donuts had inadvertently gotten into her windpipe. I started to choke and couldn't stop coughing. She said, "Oh, I see. I think a piece of donuts went down the wrong pipe."
Oh, I see. I think a piece of donuts went down the wrong pipe.
I replied. She was so distressed that she had ended up knocking on the wall for help. Thank you for coming to help an old lady like me, even at this hour of the night, she said with gratitude.
No problem. I'm glad it wasn't anything serious.
I reassured her and said goodnight, then left her room. Wait, Karim? Was there actually a room for the old lady in this crummy apartment? But once I got back to my room, a sudden wave of sleepiness overtook me, and I fell asleep immediately. The next morning, I woke up at the same time as usual. When I woke up, I felt as if what had happened the night before had been a dream. I pinched my cheek hard. Ouch! It didn't feel like a dream, but I still went to work at the branch office. After finishing my tasks for the day, I began to dwell on the events of last night. Next year, I went to the General Affairs Department at the branch office and asked,
Or switched off mission in my apartment was not a vacant room. I met an old lady there last night.
that the department head, looking flustered, began to flip through some documents in a binder. That when he found the page he was looking for, he said, "Well, it does say Afghan." He showed me the information about the apartment.
Huh, really, Sal?
I replied, "That apartment is actually a redevelopment project of our company," he said. Moreover, they plan to redevelop the entire surrounding area of that apartment. They had been informing the old residents about this and asking them to move out. Now, the last resident had moved out, and they were preparing to rebuild the place into a new condominium.
Then why am I living there?
To that sincere. Then he said it's because if the whole area was abandoned, it would be dangerous. That's why they had me, as the manager of the old apartment on behalf of the company, live there. In other words, I was like a security guard for that apartment. That day, as soon as I got off work, I rushed back to the apartment. Then, I timidly knocked on the next room's door. No response. "Excuse me, ma'am, you're there, right?" Then I opened the door. Inside, just like the night before, was a single old woman sitting quietly. There is a cup lying around in the empty room. I asked, "Why are you alone in this room?" I then gently explained to her that all the residents of this apartment had been evacuated and that it was set to be demolished soon. The old lady was quietly listening to my words, occasionally nodding in understanding. "That's why you have to leave this room, ma'am. I've known that for a long time, probably since the plan started." She began to talk about how she was the first resident of this apartment. She understood that it's not allowed to be here anymore, but she wanted to witness the end of this apartment and had come from home to do it. She and her husband moved into this apartment right after they got married. They had lost everything in the war: family, neighbors, their house, schools, everything. Aching as a young woman who had lost all her family, she was led by the thread of destiny to meet her husband, and they ended up together. First, the two of them, who had become a new family in this world, lived by pooling their strengths and supporting each other. She said that it was around the time when buildings started appearing gradually on the scorched earth left by the war. They lived together in this apartment, which was brand new at the time. In this room, they worked together, gave birth and raised their children, and watched their growth. It's been a long time since then. Her eyes welled up with tears as she remembered the past. I found myself tearing up as well. Life is long, and a lot has happened. In particular, there was an incident that still sends shivers down her spine to remember. She She and her husband had taken out a large loan from a bank in their youth. We couldn't pay back the debt, she sighed. Except the day before the repayment deadline, she and her husband had cried in each other's arms. There were times when we even thought that the three of us, my husband, our young child, and I, might jump off from the apartment and die together tomorrow. She confessed, covering her eyes with her hands as she remembered the vivid scene. She still has nightmares about that day. Rich dreams of apologizing to the bank representative, saying, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please wait a little longer." And wake up, covered in sweat, relieved that was only a dream. This room contained all these family stories. Several I realized anew that this room, with its stained walls, was the old lady's unforgettable room, carrying all these past memories. Jesus saves. Later, they resolved their issues with the bank, and the young old lady, her husband, and their child moved out of this apartment. They had worked hard and were able to move into a slightly larger room than here. I was glad for the old lady. As time went by, her husband passed away. Her son got married and they were blessed with grandchildren. Now, she lives happily with her son and his family. The old lady, who had survived the fires of war, had lived through the chaos after the war, and finally found her own happiness. Later, she was told by her son that the entire area around this apartment was to be redeveloped, and this cherished apartment was to be demolished. I absolutely objected to this apartment being demolished, the old lady told me. Then she showed me the crumpled property deed, saying she still owned the rights to this room. There was a genuine deed. "Why do you still have it, ma'am?" I asked. That was a document that she should have returned to my company. "This deed is mine. I won't give it to anyone," she said, holding the document to her chest. What a stubborn old lady. And see, according to the plan to demolish this apartment, all residents, including those living around the apartment, have been asked to evacuate temporarily. Thus we're redeveloping the site to construct a big brand new apartment. The lower floors will be filled with stores, commercial buildings, and office spaces, while the upper floors will be transformed into residential spaces for those who evacuated their homes. I said, "My company made a promise to provide a living space many times bigger than what the people had previously, as a way of giving back to them. We absolutely intend to keep that promise. So, ma'am, you can trust us with your rights?" I carefully and clearly explained to her, just as I was trained to do at my company. "Even without your explanation, I understand all that perfectly well," she replied, shaking her head. Tears rolled down her face as she expressed her deep wish to keep this room. She told her son about this, and he said, "I'd love to keep that memory-filled apartment too. After all, it's where our family began. It's the place where our family once considered ending our lives." He comforted his mother, but added, "However, Mom, we can't fight the flow of the times." It was clear that her son, always busy, wasn't taking her concerns seriously. This was her grievance with him. She also shared her feelings with her grandson, but
And Granny, the world is moving towards redevelopment and high-rise condos now.
he wondered.
So we don't keep up with the times, so we might end up in the same dire situation we were in back when we lived in that apartment with Grandpa. Seldom the way, but it's not just about us anymore. I now have a responsibility towards many employees and their families too.
The old lady, tears welling up in her eyes again, says that she truly understands all of this. She admits that her head understands, but her heart simply can't say yes and accept it as she clutches her chest. So she understood all this. I realized, yet she found it hard to bear the thought of the demolition of this apartment, where she had experienced so much joy and sorrow. Like the next day, and the day after that, I kept knocking on her door, worried about her. But nothing changed. She continued pouring out her feelings to me. But all I could do was listen, responding with silent nods. She just wanted someone to lend her an ear. I'm not good at speaking, but I'm good at listening. That's my strength. I realized this while listening to her. It was the 5th night. Finally, I shared the plan I had been thinking about with the old lady. What if we relocate this room to a part of your new apartment in the high-rise? At first, she looked puzzled, but gradually a glimmer of hope appeared on her face. Thank you, she said with gratitude. Over and over, she whispered, thank you. I left her room feeling happy. And from that day on, there was no noise from her room. I opened the door to check on her, but she was not there. I assumed that she had finally made peace with the situation and returned to her son's house. Soon, my work became hectic, and I found less and less time to think about her. But the sound of redevelopment, including the demolition of that old apartment, soon filled the air. I was swamped with work, scrambling to recruit residents for the new apartment. That was locked in gestures. A few weeks later, at last, tomorrow is the day of the demolition of that crummy apartment. Then I was called to the branch manager's office. Did I do something wrong again? I wondered, am I going to get chewed out for poor sales performance? I nervously knocked on the office door. Happy early years. May I come in? Sham. Then in the branch manager's office, the branch manager, the head of sales, and an elegant elderly woman quietly sitting on a chair. The elderly woman addressed me. Thank you very much for taking care of me in that apartment.
Are you the old lady from that crummy apartment? But what he's saying?
I was scolded by the branch manager.
He's the wife of our company's founder.
What? Really? So why was she, the founder's wife, in that crummy apartment late at night? Her explanation was as follows. My husband and I were young when we decided to start a real estate business. We borrowed money from the bank and finally managed to secure an apartment to start with. However, their business was rocked by the oil shock, and they faced bankruptcy. Eventually, they could not repay their bank loan, and they had to let go of the apartment the very next day. At that night, the young couple and their little son had their last dinner in the living room of the apartment. The husband brought home his wife's favorite donuts with plenty of chocolate sauce, which they divided into 2 and 8. I couldn't help but feel emotional. She said she still remembered that donuts tasted a little bit salty even though they were with chocolate sauce. That's because of my tears, she explained. I felt tears come to my eyes. However, the next morning, there was a long line of potential customers waiting for a viewing outside the apartment. It's because she had distributed flyers around the housing complex, advertising it as a modern apartment, and it struck a chord with the residents. But thanks to her salesmanship, they managed to bounce back from bankruptcy. Think for her. Wait a minute. I've heard this story somewhere. Yes, of course. This is the story written in the founding edition of my company's corporate history. So, the legendary figure in our sales department, the sales genius who distributed the flyers, is her. I felt humble and respect for her in my heart. However, a question popped up in my mind. I nervously asked her, no, the founder's wife,
Oh, were you eating donuts in the room next to mine at night?
She replied, because that room next to yours was the room where our business started. I remembered them. That crummy apartment was where my company was founded. And with that, everything clicked into place. I said to her,
I proposed to the head of the sales department that we relocate that room.
Everyone looked at the head of the sales department at once.
You got me. Genny, we all knew that you were out and about at night. Or Sir Chazin San of, the chauffeur of the family car reported it too. Who'd have thought you were having such a conversation in that apartment with an ordinary employee like him? If it's Granny's request, I can't refuse.
Repeated the words of the head of the sales department. The matter was settled. I was happy for her. So the head of the sales department is her grandson, and the company's president is her son. I really played the fool, didn't I? Thank you very much. Thanks to you, I was able to organize my thoughts. She said so. Moreover, you who listen well to the residents and make appropriate proposals from their perspective are a commendable member of our sales department. She praised me, saying she was happy to have an employee like me. I was delighted. It's more than that. It was a source of pride that I could make new proposals to the residents as a salesperson. The branch manager said,
That's why, at the request of her, girl, I'm appointing you as the leader of the sales department for the new condominiums.
She said that my sincere personality would surely be appreciated by the customers. Oh, is it true? I pinched my cheek as hard as I could. It hurt. This is not a dream. It's real life. I was delighted again. Subsequently, the redevelopment project in the area, including the new condominiums, was a great success. I became a respected figure in the company as the leader of the sales department. Perhaps becoming an executive in the future is not just a dream. And I received the top floor of the new condominium from the company and brought my wife and child over. Now we are happily living together. Guess what? Been neighbors with her, the founder's wife. Affections and owes her to Bennett something. I'm still a sincere conversational partner for her. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to continuing our great relationship. Yes, haha, well then, excuse me. Though it seems that the long conversation had finally come to an end, and the receiver was placed back down. The man happily flipping through the documents on his desk is Tom, the section manager, who was transferred here not too long ago. He clicks his heels and walks over to the whiteboard. Then he starts shading in the sales performance graph and looks pleased with his work.
That makes it 15 deals, not bad at all. I'm such a competent Andrew. So Pierce and Noval, technically your job to get these contracts, but I guess as an Ivy League graduate, I need to set the example.
Nobody responds, but he, with arms crossed, nods to himself. This is a cliché development, and his next move was easy to guess.
Say, Mike, I'm leaving the paperwork to you. Remember, these are my contracts, so make sure you don't slack off.
He tosses the precious contracts onto my desk with a smirk and said to me,
You should be grateful. I caught a high school grad like you working under me.
I'm Mike Harris, 29 years old. I was assigned to the sales section shortly before Tom transferred from the Montana branch. I'm just an average Joe. Tom checked everyone's educational backgrounds right after his introductory speech. While commenting on everyone's colleges, saying things like, "Oh, I know a professor from there," or "I have a friend who went to grad school." He finally came to me. He asked me about my alma mater, and I hesitated.
Segrene, you're not gonna tell me you're just a high school grad, are you? I paid on your certainness.
Yes. I just graduated from my local high school.
How embarrassing to have a high school grad working under me. Alright, here's a chance for you. Bust your chops and get some contracts in the next 3 months, and I might reconsider you work for me.
So, I hustled hard in sales. But no matter how many deals I secured, Tom would always claim them as his own. He would make just one confirmation call after receiving the contract from our clients and would then insist I finalize this contract. It's mine. I've secured a total of 15 contracts, including the one from the recent quote. Our company adds bonuses based on the number of contracts and sales figures. Yet my contract count and sales numbers are still 0. Even though I handle all the post-contract tasks, like notifying other departments and preparing delivery schedules.
You're coloring the graph in the wrong place.
What? Got a problem with it? You think a high school grad, like, you can critique me?
Are we taking credit?
That's where I personally do the final checks, making sure all the paperwork is in order, the quantities are correct. That's what makes the deal. He says high school grad like you own some sucking 7. You should just be grateful to have a job under my guidance.
My colleagues glance at me. I've told them I appreciate their concern, but please don't defend me. I can handle this on my own.
We're a letdown. I was so excited to be promoted to the headquarters, and yet there's a high school grad in my team, and so, also cheeky, so I don't want them up. So it's also cheeky to get one contract after another.
Usually, it is the manager who controls them, and no one else is allowed to take them out without permission. It's 12:40 p.m. I've cleaned everything, and even got bored swinging the broom around, so now I'm on the phone with a friend from the Montana branch. Bob Wilson was a high school classmate of mine. He's a really reliable guy who always tells me what Tom, the manager, was up to there.
Still loves locking people in storage, that man.
Lunch break will be over soon, and naturally, Tom's nowhere in sight. I could hear a heavy sigh from the other end of the phone.
But why on earth would you be put into storage, Judy? That's just weird. Oh, I see.
I hate to bring up bad memories, but Tom used to make those he deemed uneducated clean the storage all the time. At first, he'd steal their accomplishments and then send them off to storage. Those folks, they've all quit by now. He's probably trying to get you to quit too. There's no doubt he pulled the same stunts at the Montana Bridge, but there's little evidence. Although all the computers of those who resigned have been wiped clean, and no one has come forward to file any complaints. The only thing we have are a few eyewitness accounts. Mrs. Bob and a few others tried talking to upper management, but they were turned away with the simple "there's no evidence."
Even after I transferred to sales, 5 people have quit. Towards the end, they were told to go to storage almost every day. When we tried to stand up to Tom, they just end up saying, "I'll clean the storage, don't worry. Don't worry." I wish I could have more, but being a University of Montana graduate, my words didn't carry much weight. He just brushed me off.
Bob's a kind soul who chose the University of Montana because he was worried about his elderly grandparents. He moved from New York to be closer to them. I heard he'd commute from their place and often helped with chores and grocery shopping. He probably still lives with them, at least until his parents retire and move away from New York. That's just the kind of guy Bob is.
It's not your fault. Plus my lunch break's almost over. This lad through his plank, thanks for chatting.
On a problem. Oh, you're gonna go back to cleaning.
This place doesn't get much foot traffic, so there's not much to clean.
While talking to Bob, something occurred to me. Actually, to the leases, dear commiers, the document storage at the Montana branch should be about the same size, a space that should have been cleaned quickly. Yet the cleaning seemed to go on and on. What were they actually cleaning?
Everything, okay.
There's something I need you to do.
Sure. Anything.
I explained my thoughts to him and hung up. I was deep in thought when the door burst open. It was Tom.
What do you think you're doing, using your phone without my permission?
It's my lunch break, and I can do what I want. I didn't leave this room and finish cleaning as you asked.
Excuses. This is why I can't stand you people. If my subordinates are seen as low grade, it reflects on me. You're fired.
After being told I was fired, I walked past Tom to leave the room. And of course, I'd already neatly returned the broom to the closet. Cleaning up after oneself is important.
Hold on. You at least thank me properly. You may be a high school graduate, but you've been working as a member of society for a long time, so...
Doing it properly is basic courtesy. See you around.
Wait!
I gave a greeting that was probably different from what he expected, and this time, I truly left the document storage room. The next morning, several phones in the office were ringing off the hook, and my colleague scrambled to answer. Humming to himself, looked genuinely shocked at the chaos, and one of my colleagues rushed up to him. Tom, we've got a situation.
What's going on here? We've received multiple calls from clients wanting to break the contract, claiming things aren't as they were told. Break the contract. The what under us? Give me that.
Tom snatched the phone from a nearby female colleague and started speaking. His face turned pale as he listened.
Oichi, maybe there's been some misunderstanding. Why would you want to terminate the contract just because Mike is no longer handling it?
Everyone in the room was focused on Tom. I rose from the couch hidden behind the room divider and approached.
Mike, what on earth have...
Picking the receiver from Tom's hand, I introduced myself and started talking. Good day, this is Mike speaking. Yes, I apologize for our oversight. Please don't worry. I'm calling you back right away. Yes, phones were ringing incessantly around the room. Nevertheless, my colleagues were echoing my sentiments to their respective callers.
What did you do?
Farewell, just as you taught. Tom.
I simply gave our clients a proper farewell, just as you taught. Tom. Farewell, just as you taught. Tom.
Are you meddling? Are you seriously trying to ruin all the contracts you brought in? Oh, way. You just cancel them without permission. Hey, what are you thinking? Because of you, my promotion could be delayed. I'm about to become a director. You know...
Chuckling, I replied to the fuming Tom. Become a director? I think that's a stretch. Why? But the current director is on extended leave and is about to retire. That's why the CEO gave me a chance. If I could secure more than 10 contracts in 3 months, I'd have a shot at the promotion. Well, you are being tested for sure. Whether you could actually secure contracts with your own efforts, and whether rumors about your discriminatory remarks towards subordinates and your shady commission dealings were true. His face was no longer just pale. That was ashen. His clenched fists trembled, but he elicited no sympathy. Actually, the director's position isn't vacant. I'm the new sales director for the main office. A colleague, or rather one of my subordinates, handed me the printed materials I had requested. It was something Bob had found and sent to me. Take a look at this. It was left behind in the Montana branch.
Oh, what's this? All handwritten, and there's the name of the person in charge. Owl number? What is all this?
It's a record left by those who resigned, or rather were forced to resign because of you. There are entries like Tom threatened to tarnish my reputation at my next job if I complained about him, and he told me he'd erase the computer data and change the name of the person in charge. So, ends of the turn powers. There'd be no evidence. And there's so much more here. The printed data spanned dozens of pages. The originals were several notebooks, so I had the images digitized and sent to me. These notes had detailed accounts of the contracts, file numbers, and the actual person in charge. Some entries were made in different handwriting, suggesting that subsequent entrants added to the information. It was clear that a collective of former employees wanted to hold Tom accountable. There were letters that trembled, and some that had smeared. The emotions of those who wrote this came through so strongly it was almost painful to feel. Again, for the record, none of them made formal complaints. They simply documented the actual person who took the contracts.
Damn it, this can't be used as evidence. These can't be used as evidence.
Don't worry. I've already contacted several clients listed here. While records show that you secured those contracts and took the commissions, the actual negotiations were done by the employees listed in this notebook. But for those contracts not in the notebook, upon re-examination, some clients said, "I was surprised when Tom only showed up to stamp the deal." Tom looked utterly lost, slumped. He hangs his head and says nothing, but still trying to justify his actions.
I'm an Ivy League elite, not like you low-educated folks. You're deserve to be on top. They all have a cocky attitude. Hunters should be handled by elites like me. Ued just corrected that. What's wrong with removing nuisances afterwards?
Everything is wrong.
They can be.
Whether one is competent at their job isn't solely determined by their educational background. Of course, working hard to get into college and studying for many more years than others is commendable, but that just means you've had the opportunity to deeply pursue the field you want to learn. In doubt, it shouldn't be for bragging to others. The Podgridge and CIS, among the people Tom drove to resignation with his contempt. There were those with only a high school diploma, and some had even dropped out of high school. Yet, it's clear that they were all competent at their jobs. Saying by looking at the handwritten notes compiled in a notebook or the number of contracts they handled, one can easily discern this. It's a pity that the Montana branch let go of such talented people. Even when I talk like this, the man in front of me doesn't seem to show any remorse.
Where the hell did they leave this thing?
It's in the storage closet for cleaning supplies at the Montana branch. But only staff who've borrowed a key from the manager can enter that room, and cleaning companies aren't allowed in.
Hey, this has to be a joke. I'm an Ivy League graduate. I'm an elite Air Brando. But you can't be the director. Ask austing the extra over. That's gotta be a lie.
Tom glares at me, but his eyes are filled with tears. Else, is he still fixated on educational backgrounds, even though he clearly lacks job competence? Oh, I forgot to mention. I graduated from high school and then went to MIT. So, my final degree is from NT8.
Midst the...
Calm, collapsing on the spot, trembled and murmured in a faint voice, "I give up." But placing so much importance on academic backgrounds sure can be something. A few weeks later. Man, I'm so tired. No matter how much I do, it just doesn't end. Contrary to his words, Bob's cheerful voice tells me he's actually pretty happy. Virtually to the folks at the Montana branch, including Bob, seem to still be dealing with the aftermath of Tom, the former manager. They're proceeding with investigations, using that notebook as a reference, and contacting former colleagues who had resigned. The directive to clarify everything and set things right came directly from the CEO. Currently, a few people from the headquarters are assisting with the investigation.
Seems tough. Did Tom do shady stuff even before becoming a manager? Guess he did. He would change the name on the achievements of his colleagues to his own. He sins because everyone around him was so competent and produced a lot, it was hard to notice. So
The commission isn't given at the time of contract establishment, but after the first delivery, right? Seems like he pretended to help with data processing and skimmed a little from many people.
and to think he became a manager with that sort of behavior.
Did you hear from the CEO? The branch manager here is Tom's uncle. Using a little result as a pretext, he promoted him out of nepotism. There are relatives in HR and finance, and they seem to have been pulling strings. I heard all of them are getting disciplinary action. At the sheer ridiculousness of it all, I'm at a loss for words. So the Tom's family was neck deep in corruption.
Hey, Dice. Oh, and Dita. Why so sudden?
You believed me even without concrete evidence and got Tom called to the headquarters, right? He thought it was a promotion and was excited to find a wife. I feel sorry for the real manager.
Horsers, no worries. The real manager enjoyed praying to be a regular employee.
Yes, the real manager was mingling with us as an ordinary staff member. Normally, once you become a manager, you hardly get any contracts, but he was glad he could go out and get contracts during this period. It was also fun for me. Yes, all the clients who approached us for contract cancellations are from companies we have good relations with. We apologized for the inconvenience later, expressed our gratitude, and recontracted at a discounted rate. It's good to hear that. Say hi to the CEO for me. It's funny how the same uncle and nephew position is so different from his place. Keep the fact that he's my uncle a secret. I know. See ya. Bob hung up without waiting for my response. I've told Bob, but I don't want anyone else knowing that the CEO is my uncle. But it's probably because he's my uncle that he approved to this plan. As a result, he keeps pestering me about being his successor. I don't want that. I want to be an ordinary guy. Just knowing I'm from the might make some women change their attitude. I can't imagine what happened if they knew I could become a CEO. I reluctantly became a barrister, but I'm firmly against becoming a CEO. On Tidteron, the victims who left notes were paid not only the commission-based salary they were originally supposed to receive, but also an additional compensation. The source of the funds is compensation for damages to Tom. According to Bob, everyone seemed satisfied and accepted the money. Additionally, there are plans to rehire those who wish to return. It's such a relief. As for Tom, I actually saw him the other day working as a flagger at a nighttime construction site. He was being yelled at for trying to let a car through on the other side of the road, even though there was a car coming the wrong way down a one-lane road. Ivy League graduate or words like that probably wouldn't even work in that place if one doesn't think for themselves, make decisions, and strive to learn. They can't succeed in any job, even in jobs that require an educational background. It's the same thing. The construction seems to be over now, and traffic is flowing smoothly today. The trees by the roadside don't even have buds yet. Once it warms up a bit, they'll surely bloom beautifully. I can't wait for spring to come.